Your Business Podcast with Frank Furness.
Well, hi everybody and welcome to Sales School, and this is Frank Furness, where we're going to help you make more money by mastering sales, dominating marketing, and really being happy. In our next episodes, we're going to be taking a look at the psychology of sales, and I'm going to be joined by my really good friend Ian Halsall, where we speak about Neuro-Linguistic Programming. Well, I hope you're enjoying the series and enjoying some of these advanced techniques that we're speaking about now. Ian, you're one of the most amazing people because you've come up with such great stuff, and a thing you keep mentioning is this chunking. What is chunking and how do we use it?
Chunking. It's a key part of rapport and influence. In fact, talking about myself personally, when I first transformed my sales performance, I would say the first big client that dramatically increased his amount of purchasing from me rather than my competitor was an engineering company in the UK, and that was all down to chunking, which is the subject of this track. The bottom line is that people look at the same world different ways, or the same thing different ways. There are people who on the one end of the spectrum look at life as big stuff, big ideas, concepts, and at the other end of the spectrum there are people who look at the little bits of information, the detail. And in NLP this is called chunking. The big chunks are things called like concepts and relationships, motivation. These kind of words are big chunk words. At the other end of the spectrum are things like the price is $2.50, which is 10 cents less than the competitor at $2.60. These are details. These are small chunk words. So there's a whole range of ways of looking at chunking. Now, here's the thing. Depending on who you are, you will have a preference for one type rather than the other. So, for example, if somebody is a CEO, their job, day in, day out, is big chunk. Their ideas are things like, where's the company going? What's our mission statement? What are our values? Are we responsible? Do we have policies that are in line with the environment? I mean, all these kind of words and phrases are very big chunk. Your average foot soldier in a corporation, like a bank clerk, their world is very different. Their world is, I get this loan request. If it's over $10,000, I put it in tray X. If it's under $10,000, I put it in tray Y. If there's a tick in the box on the bottom, I phone them and ask them this question, right? So their world is very small chunk. If you go into a McDonald's restaurant, the person who serves you, hello, what would you like? I would like a Big Mac. They say, okay, would you like that large size? And they say, yes. Would you like that with a dessert? They say, yes. Anything else, you got to talk to the manager, because all that person does is deal with small, detailed information. So at first glance, there's a big correlation in salary with people who are dealing with big chunk stuff day in, day out, and big salaries. Doesn't always apply, of course, because some dentists or some brain surgeons, they are dealing with small chunk stuff. This blood vessel there, that brain stem there, anesthetic level at 2.07 rather than 2.01. So some people are very well paid who are basically technicians. So it depends what kind of world you're in. Now, if you're selling, the golden rule with chunking is chunk appropriately. It's not necessarily right to big chunk. It's not necessarily right to small chunk. Now, I'll give you the real-life example that I talked about earlier, because I'd just come off an MBA. So for those of you who have done an MBA or you're in the middle of doing one now, you'll probably recognize that it's kind of a big chunk training. You learn about things like consulting, human resource, government policy, market niche, growth, market sector and competition and competitive advantage. You learn all of these things, and there's usually very abstract charts in there, like boxes and circles connected by drawing arrows. And so the whole world of business studies, for a large degree, is on things that are very big chunk. Now, I went to a factory and I was doing business with this company, and they were buying about $1 million US, a little bit more, incidentally, 1.2 million to be exact, for the small chunkers listening. And that was going okay, but I knew we should have 3 times the business. So I said to the guy who was the boss of manufacturing, Barry, what has to happen in order for you to buy from us more? Because I know you're buying from the competition. You know, we're doing this amount, we're doing $1 million. What kind of relationship do you think we should have between our two companies? Now, is that small chunk or big chunk? Very big chunk. He looked at me like I'd fallen out of a tree, and he said, Ian, I've got a problem. Last week we had a pallet of pink plastic, and it should have had 48 sheets on it, and instead it had 44. And I'm looking at him like he's fallen out of a tree, you know. What kind of furry animal am I talking to here? This doesn't make any sense. We're doing $1 million. How can you be bothering me with a few dollars worth of product? Anyway, luckily for me, I read a book on NLP around that time by one of my main teachers, Tad James and Wyatt Woodsmore to be exact. And they started to talk about chunking. And I thought, wow, this is incredible. This is exactly what's happening with me and Barry. So what did I do? I just switched, and it's dead easy to switch. So I just went to have a meeting with him, and I said, Barry, wanted you to know that I've spoken with Chris in our Stevenage office, and we can do this and that, and I asked her to check with her boss, and his name's Michael. Michael said it would be okay to make this change. So what we've done is we've made a special arrangement with a factory in Memphis to put a few extra sheets on the one. You should be getting it around 9:30 on Friday morning. So I went tons of small detail. This guy became my best friend. Even after he stopped working for the company, incidentally, he still was taking me out for beers and curries and all this kind of thing. Why? Because I was matching him on his chunk level. I was talking his language, and it's very, very powerful. How do salespeople use this? Well, every time somebody's talking, it's a bit like spotting their representational system. Some people are very visual, some people are very auditory, some people are very kinesthetic. People will be giving you clues all the time. The first thing is it depends on, number one, their level of education, and number two, their type of job. Some jobs are very, very small chunk. So if you talk to somebody about what they do, that will give you clues. Like I said earlier, bank clerks, accountants, these kind of things, very, very, very small chunk. If people are in advertising or marketing or motivation or training, their world is about things like feeling good, motivation, team spirit, these kind of things. These words are very, very big chunk.
Yeah, now tell me if this is at all relevant. I've really been getting into internet marketing, and for a while I was really battling because I didn't know how to do it. I was buying every course out there. And one of the things I discovered was the secret to selling things on the internet is, well, firstly, you've got to be seen. Of course, you've got to generate a lot of traffic. But if people are then coming to your site or your sales page, your sales script is the thing that's really going to sell, because you do get different types of people. I'll get some people that read it that aren't detailed people. They want to have a look, just a couple of big headlines. They say, yes, it answers my problems. I'll buy the product. There are other people that want to know every detail. So in preparing a sales letter on the internet, I would be looking at making both of those happy. So I would have the big chunk, I would have the small stuff, I would have the detailed stuff. I might have somebody, a CEO of a big company, coming in there, taking a look at that, quick look through, says, yeah, I like this, we'll order 1,000 for our sales force. I'll have somebody who's got a little home business, and they will read every detail 3 or 4 times to make sure that their $97 is going to give them 100% good value. It's going to be answering all their questions. It's made a huge difference for me. In fact, a great book to get is a book called The Ultimate Sales Letter by Dan Kennedy, who's one of the top internet marketing guys, and he speaks a lot about the big detail, the small detail people. Now, would this be chunking in a way as well, Ian?
Yep. Definitely. And in fact, it's an interesting question, because if you're internet marketing, the question is, if you go big chunk real quickly, too quickly, where's your credibility? Because if you just hit somebody with a website, say, click on this website, and the website says, we can double your sales, send us $500, it's big chunk, but even a big chunker will probably be going, hold on, where's the credibility? So a big chunker would be motivated. They'd go, you got my interest, but how are you going to back it up?
Now, that's quite interesting. If you look at what all the top internet marketers are saying, they must all be NLP practitioners because they go through all of the same things. It's firstly about getting their attention, stimulate their curiosity, make them realize I've got a problem, expand on that problem, then come up with a solution, develop great rapport, develop more rapport with them, and only then do you bring in the price. If you bring in the price right up front, it's like me coming up to you, Ian, and saying, here's a printer, it costs £500, buy it. And you're going to say, well, I don't really need one. I don't like it. I don't like the color. You don't really see the need. There's no rapport. There's no trust. So exactly the same is happening with internet technology. In fact, if you think about it, with internet marketing, you don't have the face-to-face. You don't have the body language once again. You don't have the tone. All you've got is that 7%. And in that 7%, you've got to develop rapport. You've got to ask great questions. You've got to do all the things that we've been speaking about.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it that there's a book waiting for me to write of how to use NLP to make websites more powerful, how to make them more effective. Chunking is only a part of it. Now, the thing is that if you're going to be marketing over the internet, you've got a number of constraints that you don't have in the face-to-face process. For example, if you don't grab somebody's attention within a few seconds on a website, you've lost them. But face-to-face, people will cut you a lot more slack. So websites have got to be punchy. They've got to have information. The other thing is they've got to have informative stuff rather than selling type stuff. I mean, we were talking earlier about someone we both know, Corey Rudel stuff. A lot of that tells you that people will go to websites because they want information. And once you've established yourself as a credible source of information, then they'll say, okay, where do I go to buy? But you've got to hook them in first. So chunking can be relevant for websites. It can be relevant for selling. I better come on now to how do you move people around? Because in relationships, I'll talk personally for a moment. In relationships, there's often a mismatch with chunk size. I'll give you a great example. Many years ago, I knew this very, very nice lady, and I said to her, just by way of making conversation, I said, Jane, how was your day? And she said, well, it's interesting you should ask because I kind of got in a little bit late. Normally I'm in the office 10 minutes early, 8:50, something like that. But I arrived a little bit late. I don't know if it was 9 o'clock or maybe 9:05, something like that. So most of the car parking spaces were taken. So I decided I was going to park my car. You remember that little Ford that I told you about? Well, it's running okay now. Anyway, I managed to find a parking space, arrived a little bit late, didn't think anything of it, but there was Fred in the corner. Now, Fred said, hello, how are you doing? Is there any special reason to be late? And I thought that's a little bit unusual because Fred doesn't normally talk to me like that. So I'm sitting listening to all this small chunk stuff. So I asked the question, how was your day? Expecting the answer, it was okay or a little bit busy, but all right. And I didn't get a summary of the day. I got the day. And if you're dealing with somebody like that, this is an overload small chunker. Their whole life is small chunk. You say, what did you do? I do this. Where did you go to eat? I did this. What did you eat? What did you eat and for what reason? What was they'll say I do all these things. They'll tell you the restaurant. They'll tell you what they ate. They'll tell you the price, probably to 2 decimal places. But if you ask them the question, so what made you choose that restaurant? Then you get this blank look because they're saying, well, hold on a second. You asked me a big chunk question and I'm a small chunk person and it won't go in. So you've got to hold them by the hand a little bit. There are linguistic structures which will enable you to move up and down this hierarchy. In NLP, it's often called the hierarchy of ideas. At the top is big chunk and at the small is detail. And when I give seminars on chunking, I use the example of cars. So if you want to play for a minute, Frank, if I say, what's an example of a car? You'd say
4x4.
Right, a 4x4. And then I say, okay, and out of all the 4x4s there are, could you give me an example of a 4x4?
Mercedes.
A Mercedes 4x4.
Yeah.
And what are examples of a Mercedes 4x4?
What examples? 320, 450.
Right, so you could do it by engine size, or you could have, if you'd wanted to, you could do it by colour. There are silver ones, there are black ones, and so on. So that's chunking down. So I just asked the question, what are examples of this, right?
Right.
And now if I go in the opposite direction, I say, okay, Frank, what is a car an example of?
A car is an example of a mode of transport that will get you from point A to point B.
What is transportation that will get you from point A to point B an example of?
It's an example of solving travelling problems.
Right. Now, did you see what happened? I chunked up. Did you notice it didn't go quite as smoothly and quite as quickly when you chunk up as
Absolutely.
when you chunk down, right?
Yeah.
And you were quicker than average. Most people, and for you listening to this program, most people that you deal with, I would say, trying to think of the numbers, 80% of people are more comfortable chunking down. They are not comfortable chunking up. Very few people are good big chunkers. But people say to me, which is better, big chunk or small chunk? I say neither. The ability to move as required, behavioral flexibility, is the most powerful thing in chunking. If you can switch from big chunk to small chunk as necessary, you will be a very effective salesperson.
And it's really all about selling to people the way they want to buy.
We're back to this same theme again. If you take, before you met me, you knew the idea of selling to people the way they want to buy. All NLP does is say, okay, and here's some specific tools that will help you to sell. So if we do rep systems, rapport, and state in the earlier part of this program, now we're talking about reframing and chunking. That gives you more tools to enable you to sell to people the way they want to buy.
Well, I really hope you enjoyed today's podcast. And remember, if you'd like to book me to speak at your next conference or do some sales training, either in person or via Zoom or remotely, please drop me an email, frank@frankfurness.com. Also, please take a look at my website, frankfurness.com, and take a look at some of my courses on productivitycenter.com. Remember also to connect with me on all of the social media channels. They're all under Frank Furness, especially LinkedIn, where I'm almost up to 30,000. And every day I have some great new ideas and tips on sales, marketing, speaking, and anything that will make you money. Hey, this is Frank. See you in the next episode.